Welcome to MacroCode. If you're new to this channel, consider subscribing. So today we are going to proceed with our help desk management system. So as you can see, this is our login screen. So we're going to sign in. So if we just click sign in, so it will take us to the dashboard. So for those who are watching this channel for the first time, so we have a series of our help desk management system, which we have been doing over time. So as you can see, we have our dashboard with some graphs, and these are the tickets, descriptions. So on this other side menu, we have the recent tickets, the assigned tickets, the resolved tickets, the closed tickets, and the ticket comments. And also you have the audit trails, so you can see all the entries that we are doing. Then you have the system users, the system codes, the system roles, the departments, the system tasks, the user profiles, the system settings, the countries, and the cities. So on our previous video, we are actually doing system roles. So when you click on assign roles, we are able to check that you can actually assign multiple roles. So you can see you can actually select maybe a client. Then you can see a client has not been assigned to any role. Then when you click on everything, you can actually assign rights to all the modules, or you can actually specify some of the modules that you want. So for example, you can see I can actually untick or uncheck some of the areas that I want to assign to the client. So if I tick there, then everything will be unchecked. So you can actually check everything, or you can check uncheck all of them. And you can also check everything, and you can remove some of the items that you don't want to be assigned to that particular role. So for now, if I save the changes, it will actually save everything. But there is something that I wanted us to address yesterday. So you can see we had actually checked everything, but if we save, it is actually losing the children items. So what could be wrong? So let's just check on our application. So if you check on our application, you ensure that the IDs as, so you see here, you are passing the wrong thing. So we should actually be passing the IDs. So if you do that and refresh our application, then we should now be able to ensure that whenever we save the changes, then our IDs are actually saved. So let's just check. So if we check and save, so you can see it is now stays checked. So we should ensure that whenever it is checked, every time we come to that particular section, it should actually be checked. For example, this is the human resource manager. So if I save the changes and maybe go back to the client, then return to the HR manager, you can see I should be able to see that the rights that has been assigned to that particular role. So that is some of the things that you are able to do. So if you go to user profiles, you'll notice that you'll be able to see the entries on this particular end, and the entries will now be based with the module, that is the role. For example, if you want to see everything with the HR manager, you can just filter, and you can actually see all the modules that has been assigned to the HR manager. And if you want to see it clearly, then if you go to user rights, for example, roles, then if you just come here, you can look for HR manager. So if you go here, then we click assign rights, then you'll notice that it is actually giving us all the rights that has been assigned to the HR manager. So I want us now to control our application such that whenever we are accessing this particular application, we can actually control some of the modules that you can access. For example, like the HR manager is able to access the tickets, and we can deny them some of the tickets, some of the areas on this particular application. Even, for example, the software developer, we can assign them all the rights, and we can as well deny them some of the items. So one thing that I want us to do, let's just go to our program.cs class. So I want us to check something here. So as you can see, we have our add identity. Then here we are using application user, and we also have identity role. So ensure on our application, you have those two items there. So you have the add identity, then you have the application user. Remember, we extended our application user. So if you go to our application user here, you'll notice that we have our application user, which is actually borrowing some of the items from the identity user. So I want us to enhance our application so that we control the role. And if you see on our application user, every user is actually tied to a role. So you see the role ID is actually tied to a user. So when we are creating a user, you should actually assign the users to a role. So let's just now update our application to ensure that it is actually covering some of the items. So the one thing that I want us to do, so I want us to add something on our application. So this is now where this application is getting now complicated for those who are not following it properly. So I want us to create here a folder called, let's create a folder called, claims management. So we are going to create that particular folder. So let's just create a folder here called claims management. So let me rename this. So this will be our claims management folder. Then on this folder, I want us to create a class. So let's create a class here called user claims. Call user claims. So call it user claims principal. So call it user claims principal, then call it factory. So I want us to do something with this claim principal. So I want us to do factory, user claims principal, factory. So this is our claim. So on this claim, I want us to use, I want us to create something else. So I want us to do something with our user claims principal factory. So this one, actually we should say, let's call this my user. Let's rename this. Call it my user claims principal factory. Then if we do that, we can actually inherit something called user claims principal factory. So this user claims principal factory, we can inherit it from identity. So if I just click here, you see here we are using Microsoft.sp NetCode.identity. So if you are using that, so let us to import that. So if you import it, you'll notice that this one is still giving us some errors. Reason being, we need to pass here our application user. So here we have our application user. So, and this application user, we want also to have our identity role. So where is it? Here. So then that is cool. So here we need to implement something. So you can see, you can generate our constructor. So we have our constructor here now. So I want us to have our constructor with the options. So you see we have user manager, role manager, options, then you have these particular items here. But on top of this constructor here, let me zoom this so that you're able to see. Sorry for that. So here, I want us to have private read only. Then I want us to have our user manager. Then on our, here, I want to have our application user. Then we can say user manager. So you can say user manager. So this will be our user manager. Then I want us to copy this down here. I want us also to have our application DB context. So let's just remove this up to here. Can do application DB context. Then you can call it underscore context. Then inside our constructor here, I want us to have our user manager. Then also we have our, so I think there's something that we need to add on here. On our constructor, we need to pass our application DB context. So you can say application DB context, then you can do here context. You can say DB context, or you can do even context. So then we do a comma. Then here we need to do just underscore context, then is equals to context. Then the next thing that we need to do now, since we have our constructor already created, we need to generate claims. So I want us to have a class function here called, so I'll say protected. So you can say override, then async. You see, it is actually that. So we want this one. So if I just tap it, we are going to say generate claim. So we are going to override this. And this one is actually within this particular user claims factory. So here, I will be passing the application user. So this user, I want us now to generate the claims for this particular user. And we are going to use a claim for this application. So here I want us to say variable identity. So identity equals to, then you can do await, then you can say base, then dot generate claims, then a user. So let's remove this for the first time. Then here we'll now be having our identity. Now I want us to get the roles. So I'll say variable user roles equals to await. Then we can do underscore user manager. Then we can get the roles from here. So you can say get roles. So get roles. You have actually a function here, a method to get. So if you pass the user ID here, it will actually give us the roles of that particular user. So this will get the roles of the, so it gets a list of roles names that specify a user belongs. So then I want us to add, so here we can get the role. So I'll just say user role equals to, let me zoom in. So here we'll now get our user roles here. And we can say we can get the first because someone will only be assigned to one role at a time. So this will now give us the role. So this role, so I want us to say if a user role, if a user is not assigned to a role, there we go. That's when we start to check some of the rights that you have been assigned to them. So first you can say variable, say user role ID. So to get the ID, you're going to say here context.roles. So context.roles, then you say dot single. So you can do single here. So we can do actually await. Then here we can do single. Then we can say we can do I dot name. Then you can say equals to. Can do this is a role. So this will give us the name of that particular role. So if we do that, then here we can now get the ID. So this will give us the ID of that particular role. So I think here we can do just so we can do first or so this one we can do that way. This will give us the user role. So let's just do user role. Then we can say now user variable, so user permissions. So we can call this user permissions equals to underscore context. So let me just do await. Then we can say dot user role profiles. This is where now, so let's remove this. This is where now we have been saving our user rights. So then we can say dot where we want to get only all those rights for that particular role. So I'll just do p dot role ID. Then you can say equals to, you see here, this role, this is actually user role. So I'll just say user role, then dot ID. So if I just do that, then I'll get the role of the user permissions. So, and I don't want to get everything from this particular table. So what I want to do is I want to select some items. So I'll just say select, and I'm going to say p, sorry, so I'll just do p equals to p dot system task. So I'm going to do task here. So I'll just do task. Then I'll say dot parent. Then I'll say dot name. Then if I select this one, then I'm going to ensure that I have the parent and the task. So here I'll just do plus, then I can do that way. I have a full column, then I can add, then I just do p dot task, then dot name. So I'm going to ensure that I am able to see the task, the parent, and even the action. Then I'll now do to list. So this will give me a list of all the user permissions. So since I have that, I can actually now define here. I can define here my variable called variable all user permissions. Then I can maybe say this is string dot empty. So I have it at so let's just do it this way. Just have it that way. Then this will be my all permissions, all user permissions. Now, since I have a list of all permissions here, I can now add it to my user permissions. So I can actually say for each, I can do for each user permissions, this one, then I can say here permission. I can say here permission. Then for each of these permission, I want to get my all user permissions and I want to concatenate. So I'll just do equals to that and I'm able to get my permission. So it is actually concatenating and I'll get a list of all my permissions. But now I want to add something. I want to separate my permissions. So I can do this, then I don't just want it to be a list of everything. So I want it to be that way. Then I can have this here. Then here I can do, so I can actually have at, then I can have this way. So I'll be having all my permissions. So everywhere the at will be used to separate each of the permissions. So then that will have our list of all the permissions on our app. Then on our identity, remember we had defined our identity here. So we can actually now say here, we can say identity. We can add another claim. We say add this as a claim now. So we say new claim. Then on this new claim, we can provide it our type, the type of the claim. So we'll call this user permission. So we'll call this user permission. And then I'll pass the values. So here I'll pass my values and I'll call it all user permissions. So that claim will have that and I can actually close it here. So then the next thing that we need is, remember our generate claims needs to return our identity. So we are going to do return identity. And that is okay. So we now have our user claims principal factory. This will now return for us all the claims and we will be having our user permission. So since we have done that, I want us to go to our program.cs class and modify some items. So let's just go there. So on our programs.cs class, I want us to come here. Then I want us to do something here. So you're going to do builder.services. Then we say dot add authorization. So that's what we are going to do. This is actually now we are dealing with authorization. So I want us to do options. So let's just do options. Then we say here, and you can open. So inside our options, you can say options.add policy. So we want to add a policy, and we are going to call this permission. So we'll do permission, and then you can actually say here policy builder. So you can do policy builder. You can say policy builder. Then I'm going to do here this way. Then I can also open another brackets. Then inside our policy builder, so you'll say policy builder dot require. So you can say require requirements. Here will be requirements will be dot add. Then you're going to add our claims factory here. So here I want us to add something. So let's just so here you can say we need to add something here, but first let's just comment this. I want us to remove this first. Let's just do that, and you can do that. So since we have this, we are going to add something, and I'm going to show you how we are going to add that. But before then, since we have our permissions and policy builder, I want us to add what we've just created on our claims. That is our our user claims factory. So just below here, I want us to say builder dot, then services, and then you say add scoped. So you say add scoped. Then here I'm going to say here I user. So you're going to say I user claims principal factory. Then you're going to supply our application user. There is it. Then after our application user, we are going to now do comma. Then I want us to pass my user claims factory. You see this class here? Then you're going to do that. Then we can actually do dot add. So you can say dot, so remove this. You can say here dot add. You can say add authentication. So you can say add authentication. Then once we add authentication, we can do here options for our authentications. Then you can say we open that. Then here, let me just zoom in. Then inside here, we can now do options, and then dot default authentication scheme. Then you can say equals to identity. You can say identity constants. Then you can do application scheme. Then you can also do another one. You can just copy this line, you paste it down here. Then we have this default challenge. So default challenge scheme, we can have application scheme as well. Then you can also have another one called default sign-in scheme. Then you can have it as application scheme. Then down here, I want us to do something. Instead of closing, you can also say dot add cookie. So we can add a cookie. Then we can say also here options. So we can do options. Then we can say, can do that. Then I want us to open. So just open the brackets. Then inside here, we can now define our cookie. Say options dot, it should be options dot. So you can say expire. So you can set the expire time time span. So we can do here time span from minutes. We say our session should expire in 30 minutes. So you can do that. Then you can also have options. Then you say dot sliding expiry. We do here true. Then you can also do here options. You can do options. So you can copy this. And if we do options dot cookie, so you can actually give the name of our cookie. So you can say cookie, then you can give it the name. So you can say dot help desk dot session. So that will be our cookie name. Then you can also say options. Then you do dot cookie. Then you say dot HTTP only. Then you can say true. Then you can also do here options dot cookie. Then you can say is essential. Then you can do here true. So we now have our cookie added. Then you can just close this. So we now used our user claim principle. We have it here. Then we've actually used our cookie. We've added our cookie and we've handled some authentication. So the next thing that I want us to do now is we need to ensure that whenever we are logging in, we should now be able to use our permissions. So the next thing that I want us to cover, so the next thing that I want us to do now is, if you go to our claims management, I want us to add another class here. So I'm going to call this class permission authorization handler. So I call this permission authorization handler. So if we just do that, so this will be our class. So we have it here. So here we are going to inherit some, can call this attribute. So we call this attribute. So authorization. So attribute authorization handler. So if we just do attribute authorization handler, so we need to import something here. So this attribute authorization handler is something that I want us to define at the top. So this attribute authorization handler, so this attribute authorization handler, I want us to define it at the top here. So I want us to have everything on our application here. So you can say public. So let's just call this public. Then you can say abstract class. Then we have our attribute authorization handler. So our attribute authorization handler will be having some requirements. So we'll do T requirement. So requirement. Then we need also T attribute. Then once you have that, then we can inherit some authorization. So you can do authorization handler. So authorization. So then you can say handler. Authorization handler. There we go. So this one is actually from Microsoft.speed NetCore, then authorization. Then on our authorization here, I want us to do, so we need to pass here T requirement. Then also on our T requirement, then you can say here where. So we do where T requirement. We need to define, we say I authorization handler here. Then you can say where T attribute equals to, we have here attribute. So this attribute, then you can now open our brackets here. So you just do that. So if you open it, then we need our constructor. So we'll add it. So we'll say attribute authorization handler. Then just before that, inside our abstract class, so let's just say the type requirement cannot be assigned. So here you're saying attribute authorization. So this should be requirement, and this is a requirement. Then you say this is T attribute, and that is so this should be T requirement. So here as well it says, so let's just not worry about that. So here we are going to say public. So this should be public. We want this to be our constructor. Then we are going to open it that way. So then here, inside here, I'm going to do private. So I'll just do private. Then read only. So read only I HTTP context. So I'll say I HTTP HTTP. Sorry, should be I HTTP context. HTTP context. Let me just try HTTP context access. So that is it. Then we can pass it inside here. There we go. Then we have it there. So since we have that, I want us to do something. So we are getting this error here because here we should actually be doing I authorization requirement. That is where T attribute is equals to attribute. So that is why we are getting that particular error. So to proceed, now remember here we were passing our I authorization handler. So now we need to define something here. So I want us to do public. So I'll say class permission. So I'm going to say permission authorization requirement. Then we are going to have I authorization requirement. Then we can just do that. So inside here, you can actually, so what was it saying? So inside here, we can actually do some custom. So we can actually add any custom requirement. So we are not going to add it for today. So let's just leave it as it is. Then now here, we need to supply our requirement here. So this one. So we can have it here. Then we can also, we also need to have our permission attribute. So just at the top, at the bottom here, let's add our permission attribute. So we are going to do public class, then we are going to call it permission attribute. Then we are going to have authorization attribute. There we go. Then here I'm going to open that. Then I'll just do public string. Then I'm going to call it name. Then get set. We can actually have only, let's just get it. So we'll do get. Then on this, our permissions here, let's close it. Then we need to say, we need to have our constructor. So that is it. So on our permission attribute, we need to pass the string name. And then here, the base will be our permission. So we need to pass permission. So that is what we need. And remember here, this is what we have on our program.cs, this one, permission. So if you go back here, then you can actually say name equals to name. So on our authorization handler here, we need to say comma. Then we now have our permission attribute. So we can say permission attribute, and that will be okay. So the next thing that we need to do now is to open our constructor here. So if we do that, we need our constructor. So you can just do CTO, then, sorry, CTO, then there we go. Then I'll have my HI, so we need this one. So I'm going to copy it here. HTTP context accessor. Then I can just do HTTP context accessor. Then here we can do base. Then I'll just do HTTP context accessor. Then I need to open it that way. Then, since we have that, so what is wrong with our permissions here? We need to implement an abstract class. So you see here, we need to implement an abstract class called handle requirement async. So I'm going to add it and click implement. So you can see we now have it there. So on our handle requirement, you see we have our authorization context. We have our authorization handler context, then we have our permission requirement. Then what I want us to add here is I want us to add something else. We say I enumerable. Then we need to have our permission attribute. Then we can say this is our attribute. So we say this is our attributes. Then inside this handle requirement, we can now say if. So we say if context dot user dot identity so is authenticated. That is, if the user is authentication is actually false. If the user has not been authenticated, what should we do? So you can actually return. So just do return. But if the user is authenticated, then we can do for each permission attribute. So in attribute, so this one I'll call it permission attribute. Permission attribute in attributes. Then I'll just say if not await, then say authorize. So I want us to define something here called authorize async. So down here, you're going to do private. So today we are writing a lot of code. So I want us to take to actually go slow so that I don't lose any of you. So then here I want us to say authorize async. Then we need to pass our claim principal here. We want to check if the user is actually logged in. So we say user. So we say user. Then you can say string permission. So then I want to check if the user is logged in and the permissions they have. So I'll say variable user permissions equals to user. Then I'll say find. Remember, it's already one of the claim. So we are going to do here. You remember the user permissions claim. So let's just go to my user. You see this one? User permission. This is what you are going to use here. Then we are going to get the value. So we get the value here. Then we say if user permission is, so you can say if user permission here dot contains, if it contains our permission. So where is the permission? This one. So if it contains our permission, then we do that and we return. So here we are going to, so I'm going to close this here again. Sorry, I'm going to close that, and here I'm going to say return. Then you're going to say task, then dot from result, then you can say here true. Then else, so we just do else. You know what we need to return is that one. So then if we do that, our authorizer sync is saying a namespace directly contain members such as field names or status. So these authorize, we need to have it inside here. So I'll just copy this here, and you're going to have it inside here. So if you do that, it should be actually inside our permission authorization handler. Then if you come back now to our handler requirement, we now use this authorizer sync. Then we now say here, we need to pass our claim. So which is context dot user. Then we need to also pass our permission attribute. So it'll say permission attribute, this one, then dot name. So once you do that, then you can close this. Then we can open brackets and we can return here. So that is it. Then now down here after our for each, you now do context. Then you say dot succeeded. Then you say we pass our requirements. So we pass our requirement here and we close it. So we have now handled our handle requirements. So let's just say protected async task, then handle authorization handler context. So you have our context, then you have our permission authorization requirement. Then you say enumerable we need to have permission attribute, then we have the attributes. So what is the issue here? So we need to check what is the challenge here. So here it is saying permissioners not suitable methods to override, which is at the top here. So we need to have our, so here we need to have our protected abstract, then task, then we need to have this here. You see this requirement here, we need to have it here. Then we can now pass our authorization handler, authorization handler context. Then we just do here context. Then we also need to pass the T requirement. Then you say requirement. Then you also need to have I enumerable. So we just do here I enumerable, I enumerable. Then we do permission attribute. Then you should actually be having now our attributes. So that one will now help us to address what we've been having down there. So then just within this section here, we can now do something else. So you'll notice that we are having an issue, still an issue here. So here I'll just do private static, then enumerable, we can do enumerable, then T attribute, then I'll just get attributes, then here I'll do member, so this member, I'll just do member info, I'll do member info from a system reflection, then I'll just do a member, then I can open that. Then inside here we can say return member.get custom attributes. Then you can say true, and you can do .cast, then them to T attribute. So if we do that, that is okay. So here I've actually added these handle requirements. So we have this handle requirement within our authorization handler. Then we have all this that we've added. So there's a lot of code that we've tried to update. So here we need to have these as a user profile. So we need to have these as a user permission. So these are class. So for those who have been following, there's a lot of code to write. So let me just zoom in so that in case you need to follow, this is how it looks. So these are some of our permissions handler. So if you need that, you can claim the source code. So the next thing that I want us to do now is let's now go to our program.cs class. And remember, we had added some items on our program.cs class. So we had added permission, then policy builder. So here, I want us to add, before even doing that, I want us to add another service here. Then you say services, then you say .add singleton. I want us to add singleton. Then you are going to add our I authorization. So I'm going to add authorization handler. Then I'll be passing our permission authorization handler here. So that is what you have been creating. So we have done some modifications, and that is it. So this is so it's saying here. So this is add singleton. Then this should be authorization, not authentication. I authorization. So this should be I authorization handler. Where is it? Authorization handler. Then we pass our permissions authorization there. Then down here, we want to do policy builder. So here we'll just do policy builder. We had added this. So if you don't have this, ensure you have it. Then we do requirements. So I'll just do requirements. Then I'll say .add. Then I'll just do a new. Then I'll do new permission, authorization requirements. Then this is a method. Then that's initialized and we have it there. So we've been able now to set our application to check everything. That is from our permissions to now our claims that we added on our my user claims principle. So this is actually our user claims. So what I want us to do now, if we check our users, I want us to ensure that our user is assigned to the correct account. But for that, let's just sign in and check what is happening. So we've been able to write this code. So I want you to write this code. I'll now be showing you how we can control the permissions now based on what we have done. So this is the code that we were missing, which will now help us to ensure that we control some of the items that we are doing. So you can see it's actually a long code, and we cannot have this continue because it will be a long video. So I'll be posting another video on how we are now controlling the rights. So let me just sign in and see if our application has been broken or we have everything intact. So let's just sign in and see how this goes along. So if I just sign in, so let's just sign in. So you can see our application is still okay. So if we go to users, we should now ensure that we have our user should be assigned to a role. So I'm going to create another user and we are going to assign them to a role. For example, you see we have the user, which user? I think we have this particular user that we are using is actually assigned to ICT manager. So we should now check that this particular user has some roles, so has some permissions. So if you go there, we can assign them permissions and we save it. See you in our next video. Bye.